Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Hello and welcome back, adventurers. Having gone through all of ranking the multi-class archetypes, which I know I did a while ago now, but just stay with me here. I wanted to jump back into them and in just one video talk about the best features, feats, focus spells potentially to take and get a hold of when you're taking one of these multi-class archetypes. This is a suggestion I got from one of my videos, so thank you for everybody who comments on the videos. It really does help a lot, and I really just appreciate all the thoughts that I get. Sometimes it just really helps the creative process as well. Anyway, let's not waste time. So again, keeping this to most of the time, anything you can get by the time you get character level 10, possibly up to character level 12, but not really talking about beyond that because I want to stick with things that you can actually get a hold of while you're building your average character that might make it through a regular campaign and not worrying about some of the really high level stuff you can take. I'm going to go ahead and take this in alphabetical order and kick off with the Alchemist. So keep in mind that you get trained with alchemical bombs and get quick alchemy with 4 vials a day just by getting the dedication, plus you get to learn 4 formulas. That's a ton by itself, right? The dedication here is doing so much of the work. If you took this as a martial or a near martial, then you already had trained or better with bombs, but still, you get that if you didn't have it. If you want to add bombs to your arsenal because you are already melee and you might need some ranged options, or you just like triggering weaknesses, definitely look for Far Lobber and Quick Bomber as some of those early feats to take. Right at level 4, you probably want Quick Bomber, and then maybe even at level 6, you might want to take Far Lobber, but you may not need the Far Lobber so much. Quick Bomber is way more important, but both are really good if you want to be a bomb thrower. No matter what kind of character you are, though, you're probably going to want to take Advanced Alchemy, and this is an archetype feat that you get where you get free alchemical items each day so that you can have even free healing and boosts and all that for the party. And assuming that you take this feat, and you should, the best low-level feat is then Efficient Alchemy to go with it, which you can grab at level 8 at that point. This takes you from 4 alchemical items each day for free up to 6 plus your intelligence, which is a boost no matter what. But if you happen to play a martial that leaned into intelligence, or a near martial like an Inventor or Commander or something that's an int-based near martial, this is going to be crazy. It's also really good for full casters like witches and wizards. With the Animist, we get to choose one apparition to attune to, but we can swap with a day of downtime. What we will never be able to get is the special focus spells that are normally granted with the apparition, which is really unfortunate, but it's fine. Because we are a divine caster, it's important to grab an apparition with solid non-divine cantrips and low-level spells available to provide more options for yourself, though you might prefer to choose by skill gains that your apparition has. Personally, I would look at Steward of Stone and Fire if you're a non-primal caster already, like to start with as your base class, or Reveler in Lost Glee if you are a primal caster, or Witness to Ancient Battle if you're a martial taking this. As for feats, we can't take any with the Wandering trait, but there are still good choices. Chandler's Stance is a solid pick for spellcasters taking this archetype, as the healing bonus works on all spells, and the other bonus can be nice even if it won't hit as hard as it does for like a full Animist. You can also build on that with Channeled Protection at level 8. Remember, when I say like level 8, I mean that's the character level you have to be at in order to get this, because it's a level 4 feat for the class. So I'm just adjusting that for you so you know what level you'll get it at if you take this as a multi-class archetype. Finally, if you are a martial or near martial taking this and you plan to use the spell slots on one-action spells like True Strike, consider Apparition's Enhancement for just a small boost for free, right? It's just a little bit of damage when you cast a spell. Your next strike gains a small amount of damage. It's nice. I don't think it's crazy, but it's nice. Now, if we only had some wisdom-based near martials. But I digress. Jumping into the Barbarian, you are going to get Rage, and I'm going to assume you plan to use it if you chose this archetype. Otherwise, why did you take it? So, assuming you're going to Rage, so that's the case, you'll need Moment of Clarity if you plan to cast any spells or do anything with the concentration trait. So just keep that in mind. That might be critical for your entire build. At level 6, you can get the instinct ability for your instinct. This could mean a massive change in your rage damage boost, like if you went giant, for instance, though then you'd have a really bad AC, but could be a damage boost you wanted. I'd recommend the elemental instinct. This gives you a +4 rage damage bonus, which of course ties to the element you choose, and the instinct ability, as well as the concealment to ranged attacks, which is awesome. If you are a monk or unarmed attacker, you could grab something that goes with like the animal instinct. So it depends on if you want to use your own base stance strike, or if you want some animal instinct abilities and attacks. As for non-instinct feats, sudden charge is just a great opener, right? 2 moves plus an attack for 2 actions feels really good. Intimidating strike adds conditions and damage, and finally, swipe is solid for anybody wielding a massive 2-hander and wants to face off against multiple enemies at once. A dangerous choice, sure, but if you want to live dangerously, it can be fun. Bards will have you choosing a subclass, but that's really just for access to feats. You're not going to get the subclass bonuses. I highly recommend grabbing Anthemic Performance. This is available at level 8 in the Archetype, because this gives you Courageous Anthem, and Courageous Anthem is amazing. It's just really good. But there are other solid feats to take in the class Archetype as well. If you are a grappler, for instance, or have one in the party, you might want to go with the Warrior Muse just for Song of Strength. Or if you take Polymath for Esoteric Polymath and gain a spellbook. But for most, I would suggest Maestro. And at level 4, you can take Uplifting Overture. And as long as you've been investing in performance, you just get to aid everybody with performance and do a really good job of it. And being able to aid people with just one thing like this is really valuable. Plus, you can grab Lingering Composition eventually as a huge boost to your composition cantrips. So I do think that's a strong combo, and that can work for anybody. You don't have to be a caster or anything to gain a lot out of the cantrips, which is something I really like about bards. Champion, which I grossly underrated, it's very powerful, especially for your early choices. You're getting a cause, and at level 6, you get access to the reaction for that cause if you take the Archetype feat to get it. Of course, you have to take an Archetype feat to get that reaction, but you should. It's worth it. You really should. I recommend something like Liberation as an easy all-around party helper, but if you want to be more vindictive or play, a less honorable character, Obedience is just kind of fun, but we'll get into more of that whenever I go into ranking and doing my videos about Champion, which isn't too far off. Anyway, you can take the level 4 Archetype feat, Devout Magic, which lets you choose a focus spell from 3 different focus spells, and they are some good focus spells. So of the choices, Lay on Hands for healing or Shield of the Spirit for nice party buff. Both I think are great. I don't know that I go third option, but I recommend Lay on Hands just because reliable healing in combat can be a struggle without certain casters. But if you have a party healer, I would take Shields of the Spirit just because it's nice defensive boost. I would probably avoid Touch of the Void. At level 6, you can go and take Blessing of the Devoted, grabbing a passive boost to your weapon, shield, or movement. Honestly, in my opinion, the movement option's just the strongest choice on average, with a nice boost for you and a defensive bust for your allies against reactive strike type abilities. I suppose I should mention, though, that there are feats, even though there's so much built into the archetype itself that taking any of the actual feats for champions is almost hard to do. Like, there's too many good choices early on, but still. The real gem is at level 1, which of course you can take as soon as level 4, which is Deity's Domain, allowing you to grab another focus spell, this time tied to your deity. There are far, far too many for me to talk about, but choices like Sun for Dazzling Flash to add some control to your kit, or Cold with Winter Bolt, adding some ranged damage to your kit. As for other champion feats, Defensive Advanced is great if you plan to play using a shield, or of Courage is amazing to keep Frightened from being an issue for your party, or just Mercy if you took Lay on Hands and want to buff it up to remove conditions as well. There are almost too many things to even talk about. So Champion, just really good, flexible, heavily consider it. Okay, so yes, took a bit to get through Champion, but Cleric is interesting too. Maybe not as much to talk about. Clerics get cantrips immediately, and feel free to check out my best and worst cantrips video for thoughts there. You also choose a deity, so keep that in mind. You probably took this to get your spell casting though, because it's a full caster, so you want to get your spellcasting on, and it's a good choice. But Cleric has a few feats worth looking at beyond just the spellcasting. So you're going to get your cantrips at level 4. You're going to want to take your basic spellcasting. But what do you want to do after that? Well, grab Domain Initiate. Just like with Champion, I really suggest there's some great choices. Same choices here, right? There could be different things you want to do with it in this case, but I still think it's a very solid choice. If you are a martial who likes being in the fray, rapid response can be helpful to both get, you know, your ally, but also become like the target of whatever that would take them down. So you're aiding them, you're getting yourself in the way, setting up for attacking and reviving next turn. It's just it's an interesting playstyle, and I think it's really useful. And then Raise Symbol is just a great defensive option at level 8 you could take, assuming that you throw it on a shield and you're going to raise the shield anyway. Taking a look at Commander, we get access to 2 tactics immediately, but only 1 prepared. So you're going to have 1 tactic ready to go. I recommend Gather to Me and Pincer Attack. Both cost only 1 action, but they serve very different purposes. If you have a more specialized team, say everyone uses firearms, then you may want other options that might be better for you, but those 2 are more generically good, I think. You get the option to add 2 more tactics and prepare 1 more at level 4. You should probably take that. I think that's usually a wise plan here. You might add Tactical Takedown and Defensive Screen as those new tactics. I think those are good choices. As for Commander feats, I like Combat Assessment if you're a melee martial, because Recall Knowledge is great when it's free. Plant Banner can be interesting because since you aren't tied to it as a commander, you know, it's a little different in the way it plays out and could be really nice for party buffing. Setup Strike is actually great to create opportunities for allies, especially if there's a rogue in the party. So, you know, help really get things off guard so that your allies can take advantage of that with their strikes. Onto the Druid. Once again, we have those cantrips with the dedication, primal this time, of course, and then you're going to choose an order, which matters for feats and focus spells. I suggest if you want to do range damage, just take Storm, or you can take Spore if you want to go for a little more control option. You'll need to take the Order Spell Archetype feat at level 4 if you want to get access to that focus spell. Keep in mind, this is also when you can get just the basic spell casting, so probably one than the other at 4 and 6, or both at 4 potentially. If you just want to, you know, if you've got free archetype going and you can take both at level 4, it might be worth it. I would avoid taking an animal companion just because you won't be able to get feats to raise it up fast enough, and it's going to fall behind massively. If you really want a animal companion, just take the Beastmaster archetype instead of taking the Druid. It's a good choice too. Taking Order Explorer and eventually Order Magic can grant you another solid focus spell from another subclass and gain you another focus point. All that's really good. There are a few good Order-related feats as well, like Alessi Familiar from Leaf Order or Fire Resistance from the Fire Order. So it really depends on what you're trying to build in that you feel is missing from your character. Exemplar is interesting because it offers a ton of power with the dedication. Like, just ridiculous with its dedication. But the feats aren't quite as strong unless you have a very specific build in mind. As for what icons are best to take, I recommend focusing on those with great passive benefits, because you have to give up an action in order to get your spark back into your icon after you've used its transcendence. So that's not ideal, at least that's how it is at first. But you still want a good transcendence if available, and use it, you know, when you can, because they are still very powerful. For casters or support players, I recommend Victor's Wreath for a nice passive attack bonus for your allies, or the Mirrored Aegis if you plan to use a shield, because this is just completely strong in all aspects. Fetching Bangles are fantastic if you want to prevent enemies from running away, and the Skybearer's Belt is really amazing for grapplers. As for weapon users, I like Gleaming Blade or Titan's Breaker for consistent melee damage, and the Unfailing Bow for ranged players. Finally, for Throne players out there, Shadow Sheath is amazing if you can meet the requirements for it. If you're going to get to or past level 12 with this character, then you should absolutely take a second icon. So normally I won't talk about getting up that high, but you need to. If you're going up that high, you need a second icon. That's amazing. Keep in mind what you have too, then as you use their transcendence abilities, you can move the spark back and forth between them, so it's never just stranded. As for early feats, they aren't my favorite choices. Energized Spark is good if you have creatures or certain types that you know you're going to be able to trigger its weakness more easily, but Spirit's already really reliable, so I wouldn't worry about that. If you are a melee martial who plans to dual wield, then Twin Stars is amazing. and you just turn your weapon icon into a pair of them. Hurl at the Horizon is fantastic for thrown weapon builds, which is why I really like this for thrown weapon players. I think it's just perfect for them to go Exemplar. Finally, Red Gold Mortality is an Imminence ability. It isn't the strongest, but you can stack it on your weapon icon and you add potential added value on top of everything else you're doing. Keep in mind that most of the feats that we have early on are related to weapon icons. So if you didn't take a weapon icon, it's going to be a lot harder to find any feats that you're really excited about. Up to the Fighter, not my favorite multi-class archetype choice to take, and the dedication isn't too much to speak of, but at level 4 you can and should take Reactive Striker, granting you the Reactive Strike reaction. That's really what the purpose of taking Fighter is, I feel like, most of the time, but it's not the only feat that I recommend, because Fighter has some really good low-level feats setting up different builds. Sudden Charge for any melee martial is a good choice. Vicious Swing and Swipe are for those two-handed weapon wielders. Vicious Swing can do particularly good damage. Double Slice and Twin Parry are great, like 6 and 8 for dual wielders. Point Blank Stance and Assisting Shot for range builds. If you're a near martial who invested in skills to recall knowledge, then Combat Assessment is a solid grab, like I mentioned before. And if you have a martial game plan, there will be something in here worth taking. So as much as I don't love this as a multi-class archetype, there are things to take. And if you came here for Reactive Strike, you've still got things to gain from at levels 4, 8, and 10. For those grabbing the Guardian multi-class archetype, you get the fantastic taunt action with the dedication itself, which is great for some control within the combat. This is, a solid setup for beefy martials like champions and barbarians, but it'd be good on ranged martials as well, and even casters if you want to really force enemies to do certain things or take penalties. Just keep in mind that if you're going to use this as like a caster or somebody ranged, you're probably going to need the long distance taunt feat to really get the most out of it. If you're a melee martial though, and into protecting your allies, then this archetype feat grants the Guardian's Intercept at level 6, which is a really solid reaction. That's normally like a base class feature. I'd consider that. As for class feats, other than long distance taunt, of course, Defensive Advance and Reactive Shield are both really useful, though only shield users can get value out of them. But still, if you're a shield user, great. Taunting Strike and Shielded Taunt are both great for action economy and can fit for different kinds of characters. You don't have to be that melee martial necessarily to do that, but it's going to help if you are. Armored Courage may not be exciting, but it is valuable in the right campaign. So just one last thing to think about. With the Gunslinger, you'll get to choose a way, the subclass, but you just get the skill that it grants. You're going to gain training in whatever skill is tied to that subclass. You will want to grab the archetype feat Slinger's Readiness to get the initial deed for your way at level 6. So this makes a big difference if you are using guns or crossbows. If you're planning to get to level 10, you want to take the Slinger's Reload, as it does help with action economy quite a bit. The best subclass or way to go with really depends on the kind of gun or crossbow you plan to use. There are no early feats that require a specific way either, so don't worry about that. Just throwing it out there, I like the Pistolero, but I know many are fans of the Sniper. If you went Drifter, however, both Sword and Pistol, the feat, and Dual Wield Reload are very strong early choices for feats. Munitions Crafter and Alchemical Shot are a fun pair, and it fits nicely on near martials like Inventors, Alchemists, and Investigators, so do keep that in mind as well. And Paired Shot is great if you're going to go with dual pistol builds, but having to reload both really isn't very fun. The Inventor is an interesting one, thanks to actually getting the innovation, right? So you actually get that at level 2 when you take the dedication. They aren't powerful like icons are for Exemplar in the same way. Although if you are a martial character, I suggest either weapon or armor. The weapon is interesting because you can grab an advanced weapon right away when you take this, and you get to treat it as martial, which is a huge improvement. Both of the armor options are solid, but you'll need medium armor proficiency to be able to use them, so keep that in mind. I don't recommend the construct just because you won't be able to keep it up with feats to keep it good like you could with, Beastmaster and taking a beast that way. So I don't recommend that for most characters when you're doing the archetype style. Brilliant Crafter is absolutely worth it if you plan to craft heavily, so that's just one of the archetype feats. It's really, really good. Oil Fire is very fun if you are a grappler, and Wukong Extension, if allowed, can be a big deal for melee martials with a weapon in evasion. Keep in mind that Unstable likely doesn't hurt you as much as it does a full Inventor, because you'll have fewer actions that are hampered by it. Megatongue Strike and Dual Weapon Form are really both looking at for level 8 as well if you're going with a weapon build. The Investigator archetype grants you both Pursue a Lead and Clue In right away, which are good for roleplay and can help with perception checks like Initiative. No matter what class you play, it's worth grabbing Devise a Stratagem at level 4. This should kind of work as a free action most of the time, depending on what your GM lets you allowed to call, like, you know, part of your investigation, but I know that I run it and usually Devise a Stratagem is a free action. So getting to know your attack roll before attacking against a certain target, martial, or even attack caster is really fantastic. I would only take Keen Recollection if you felt your recall knowledge needed a boost and didn't plan to take the Untrained Improvisation general feat. As for actual Investigator class feats, depending on your GM, Takedown Expert gets either around the no int for attacks rule, or it's completely invalid. So talk to your GM about that one. But if valid, it's a great grab for int near marshals. Known Weakness is great for anyone because free recall knowledge, even if narrow, is fantastic. And grapplers will love Athletic Strategist, giving them more confidence in the ability to control a given enemy. Finally, Strategic Assessment is another very solid choice for any martial, since no recall knowledge is actually required. There are some great uses for the Kineticist for low-level characters, but the best is probably Elemental Barbarian being able to take this. First, we get an element, the ability to channel an aura, and we can make our blast. I wouldn't grab base Kinesis or even worry about buffing my Elemental Blast on almost any character, because casters and marshals have better things to do than Elemental Blast with how slowly it progresses here. If you are an Elemental Barbarian, make sure to grab the corresponding element, right? You want the right gate for the type of Barbarian you are. Regardless, you want to grab feats as soon as you can. Keep in mind that Heighten for impulses is tied to your character level. So Heighten +2 means 2 character levels, not 2 spell levels, but also doesn't mean 2 levels in this class archetype. It means 2 character levels. So for a support character or caster, it's really hard to go wrong with wood. You can grab Timber Sentinel right away. It's not amazing forever, but it's still great, and actually it can be useful for a very long time. The Defensive Wave is a fantastic defensive reaction, and if you have water, you can get up to level 12, that is. Just grab Torrent and Blood for kind of like free healing out of combat, at least. Well, I mean, there's in combat too, but like out of combat, you can just free heal every so often. I would stay away from damage options just because you're going to fall behind a lot, and this is mostly cantrip damage, but it's going to take so long to get good damage options that I don't know that it's the strongest way. They will, you know, obviously upcast themselves to the right level, so that's nice. And also, overflow can be really painful for you early on. Keep in mind that when you overflow, you drop your aura, right? And then you have to channel again, but you don't get to do a free blast when you channel. So channeling's more costly for you than it is for an actual Kineticist. For melee martials, I still like Deflecting Wave, and later on Winter Sleet for one action. That makes it hard for enemies to get away from you or get up to you. And then there's Fire, which is great for melee martials thanks to options like Burning Jet for great movement eventually, but you really want Thermal Nimbus for some great free damage round after round for every enemy who stands near you in your aura. There's just way too many feats to cover. Very cool, lots of flexibility, lots of things to consider. With the Magus, you'll also have some really great options. You get cantrips right away, always good. But these are arcane, so no guidance, but lots of other really good choices. Given the way Spell Strike works, grab at least one single target attack cantrip. It has to go after the AC or it doesn't work for Spell Strike. So go something like Gouging Claw or Needle Darts or something. If you are a caster taking this archetype, it may or may not be worth it taking that time to Spell Strike, but you probably took this for that. So at level 4, you generally want to grab Spell Strike. At level 6, the choice is tough. I would recommend that marshals grab basic spell casting and add leveled spells for more interesting spell strikes. But as a caster, I'd probably recommend the hybrid study spell for another focus point. As for which study I would take, as a caster, I'd probably be using a ranged weapon, so I would be taking Starlight Span. But as a martial, if I took this over basic spellcasting, I'd grab either Laughing Shadow if I was using a one-handed weapon, or Inexorable Iron with a two-handed, or Sparkling Targe if I was playing a tankier character like a champion or a guardian, or even commander for that matter. If you want to go for the feats, still assuming you have Spell Strike here, so there's a lot of stuff you just want to take from the archetype, I would grab Expansive Spell Strike as a caster, or a martial planning to grab more spells later on. As a martial, I might grab Cantrip Expansion as well, but I wouldn't as a caster because you already have enough cantrips. For casters out there, I might pick up Emergency Target if I had grabbed that associated subclass, of course, or else you can't grab this, but otherwise it's very useful. Or if you just want, another focus point and another focus spell, you could grab Force Fang if you want to. Finally, if you're a monk or unarmed grappler, you might want to take Arcane Fists as soon as you can. Speaking of monk, you get basically nothing from the dedication. Hooray! You almost certainly took this for Flurry of Blows at level 10, so make sure you grab that when you get there. There are some interesting feats though. If you plan to grapple, you might want a stance for stronger unarmed strikes. Be careful because many require you to be unarmored in order to even use them. Stumbling Stance is a solid choice though for this reason because it doesn't require that. If you are a full caster with no armor training, like a wizard, you might just want to go with Monastic Archer Stance if you went high dex as a second attribute, which you probably did for the armor, I don't know, and want to make attacks. Again, that's why you took this. If you weren't going to make attacks, you wouldn't have taken the monk, my guess. Crushing Grab is solid for grapple build, and taking Inner Upheaval for key spells is a decent focus spell if you plan to make unarmed strikes. At level 8, you can consider Deflect Projectile for any character that will have a hand free. And if you took the key spells for the grapplers earlier, if you just took key spells earlier, you can take Harmonized Self for a solid one-action heal focus spell. And for those melee grapplers or marshals out there that have some reason that don't yet have Reactive Strike, I suppose you could always grab Stand Still. Oracles can provide solid power, but you have to remember there are trade-offs for that power. You get your 2 cantrips, but also a mystery. You probably want to base your choice off of the focus spell that you could grab as early as level 4. That's, you take a level 4 Archetype feat, grab its focus spell. Though it might be the curse you care more about, sometimes you actually want the levels of the curse because what you get from it is better than the drawbacks. For a caster looking at focus spells, I'd look at Ash for Ashen Wind, since your save DC will be solid, and Life if you're a support caster for solid hit points, as it's a decently helpful one-action cast. For marshals, I like Ancestors because it's one action, it's touch, and the target can still take damage on a success, though keep in mind that the clumsy when cursed isn't going to feel amazing. If you happen to be a Kineticist who has Thermal Nimbus and is fighting in melee, absolutely consider taking Flames. This is because every enemy that comes near you is going to take persistent fire damage on top of the Thermal Nimbus damage, and the persistent fire damage that you take will be negated by the resistance that you've got from your own fire. So all of this together makes you a really interesting solid fire build on top of what you already have from being a Kineticist. As for good feats to take, I'd say Nudge the Scales is amazing as a one-action heal, though Cursebound for a caster to have, or a marshal looking to have some support available. Whispers of Weakness is really solid for a marshal. At level 8, you could take Thousand Visions for emergencies as a marshal when you are dealing with, concealed or hidden creatures, and casters could grab Knowledge of Shapes to keep in their back pocket. Again, keep in mind, you can only use Cursebound feats up to your Curse Max, which as an archetype is maxed out at 2 and will not increase. So highest you can go is Cursebound 2. And here we are with the Psychic, which doesn't waste your time, and you choose a Conscious Mind to start, choosing one of its standard, meaning not the unique cantrip. So one of the two it gets it isn't the unique cantrip, and you get the boosted version of it, and you even used to get a focus point to amp it, but now you don't get that focus point anymore, which hurts a lot. There are great choices for the Conscious Mind, but I would look at the Unbound Step. just for crazy movement with the amped version of Warp Step once you can amp it. Also, the Infinite Eye taking guidance is really good on anybody. As for side development at level 6, this will almost always be worth it for the focus point alone, but many of the unique cantrips are strong as well and worth taking, including for those who already recommended, with the recommended Conscious Minds already given. Keep in mind that the focus point from side development is only granted if you don't currently have any. That's how I read it. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So this got a lot worse because before the remaster, you just got the extra point as well, which is weird. For feats, there are some restrictions. We can't use anything that requires us to unleash our psyche, so nothing with the psyche trait, but there are still good choices. Cantrip expansion can be really nice, especially on marshals, but, you know, probably grabbing utility, not damage cantrips. Depending on what cantrip you took, Mental Balm can be useful in certain situations as a different amp option. And at level 8, you might want to take Psi Strikes if you're a marshal, since it's not amazing, but you're probably using some spells already, and it's a little extra damage, especially if you're using one action spells. Casters might find that Homing Beacon is useful, but it is pretty situational. You're here for casting without a doubt, and in my opinion, best classes to grab are near marshals or charisma, which is so many of them. Ranger is not the best suited for near marshals, but can grant them some solid options. We get Hunt Prey with the dedication, which is good if you do play in like a monster tracking hunting campaign. The Archetype feats aren't really worth worrying about, but there are some good options for class feats here. Hunted Shot is great for bow wielders or even casters looking for a bow-based single action after casting a spell, while Twin Takedown is solid for any dual wielders out there. Just keep in mind that you have to be targeting your prey for these to actually do anything. Hunter's Aim is a solid feat for a ranged character using a deadly or fatal ranged weapon. In fact, if you have taken this as a gunslinger or any character using like a firearm, it can be a great way to really punish with some solid critical hit damage, but having both Hunt Prey and a need to reload is going to be tough. At level 8, that gun build could take Running Reload to help with the action economy issues, although you could have probably taken that with your main class as well, depending on what class you are. Melee marshals might want Disrupt Prey or even a half striker stance if you have a two-handed melee build, that is. And finally, Scout's Warning is good for anyone, including casters, to help the party go earlier in combat. Rogue is a fun martial choice. You get light armor training. This is nice for casters out there with no armor training. Then we get a skill feat and even surprise attack feature, making creatures off guard to you round 1 if you roll deception or stealth. For initiative, it's usually not hard to pump points into stealth and kick off that way either. It's likely you went this way to grab sneak attack, though it's really not that strong here, but might be worth it at least at level 4 if you're doing a low level campaign. I would consider Uncanny Dodge at 10 for Deny Advantage. Skill Mastery is just kind of solid always, right? Just boosting up your skills is always useful. As for class feats, Nimble Dodge is just plain good, but especially good on characters with few or no reactions, like casters or even many marshals, really. Tumble Behind is strong for any acrobatics melee build, especially melee marshals that already use acrobatics heavily. And mobility is just amazing on casters to help them get out of harm's way more than just 5 feet. At level 8, Dread Striker can be amazing on a martial build that employs fear really heavily, essentially turning Frightened into a -3 to AC against your attacks. Poison Weapon is also a fun choice if you normally fight with a hand free, so like a bow build or, one-handed in a dual setup, but you can poison your blade with the one free hand. All right, no surprise here with Sorcerer, but we are going to get 2 cantrips with their dedication. We're also going to choose a Bloodline, and the cantrips are from the Bloodline's spell tradition. Importantly, we won't have access to blood magic from the Bloodline. It's worth choosing the Bloodline off of a combination of spell tradition and initial focus spell that you want to grab at level 4, and at level 4 you probably should. Aberrant for Tentacular Limbs can actually be really interesting on a monk or any unarmed striker. Angelic Halo from the Angel isn't overly powerful, but on a cleric, it can really do some work. Genie has a strong defensive with Genie's Veil for protecting yourself or an ally. For spellcasters, the Imperial can be a great way to set up strong control effects, especially at higher levels. Beyond that, we have full casting stuff here, right? So you can take all the feats that relate to full casting and getting you all of the actual spell casting at different levels. So let's talk about the actual feats, because we know that spellcasting is good. Given the amount of early feats that build upon or use blood magic, I would look at grabbing a familiar or expanding the number of cantrips you have, because there's not a whole lot you can take other than that. If you take a feat at level 8 or 10, it's worth looking at evolution feats, depending on your spell tradition. The occult and arcane will offer you ways to add more spells to your repertoire, and the divine gives you an extra slot for your highest level just to heal or harm, which is actually incredibly powerful. The primal you should ignore, and for martials there is Bespell Strikes as usual if you want to add a little bit of damage. A divine martial or near martial using one action to heal themselves and then adding damage to a strike, it might not be a bad way to go. If you choose to take the summoner archetype, and I really don't recommend it, you will get an Eidolon, but you won't get anything signature from it, and it'll have reduced stats. Also, we can't take any feats with the tandem trait. And finally, we get no cantrips or anything spell related with the dedication. At level 4, you can access the Eidolon's initial ability, so that's probably what you chose and why you wanted to do this. As a spellcaster or ranged martial, I might consider the Anger Phantom, Devotion Phantom, or Elemental, depending on if I need a strong melee attacker, defensive retaliator, or just less susceptible melee ally. As a melee martial, I don't know, I still look at those, but you might also want to look at Fae to give yourself a ranged spellcasting companion option. Then we have the feats. Ranged attacker might be worth choosing for your Eidolon if you wanted to have a ranged attack option, keeping it out of harm's way a bit since it can take damage for you. The focus spell Reinforce Eidolon not only gives you another focus point, but also helps you reduce the damage that your Eidolon will take and therefore how much you will take. At level 8, if you want your Eidolon to act more defensively, and as a caster or ranged martial, that might help, you can grab Defend Summoner for an AC boost. I would actually consider Reactive Dismissal. If your Eidolon takes a big hit, you can reduce that by a lot and then just get rid of your Eidolon for now so it can't take more damage for you. Keep in mind that, of course, you still have your main class going for you, so even if you dismiss your Eidolon, it's not like the Summoner where it completely cripples them, you're still your main class. The Swashbuckler is more straightforward, but we get a lot in the dedication, choosing a style, adding bravado to the style action, and tumble through, allowing us to gain panache. That's all just built in. Really solid stuff, honestly. To get the most of panache, we need a finisher, and at level 4, we can grab a basic finisher from the Archetype. This also gives you a weaker version of precise strikes that doesn't increase, which, matters for taking any other finishers, obviously. At level 8, the speed increase may be worth it for martials out there. As for which style to go for, that really depends on your build. Grapplers are going to want the Gymnast. Charisma casters could get a lot out of the Braggart using Demoralize, and melee martials like Rogues and Investigators might want Fencer or maybe even the Rascal. On the feat side, there are some great early choices. Flashy Dodge for just anybody out there without their own reaction earmarked. Flying Blade is fun for thrown weapon builds. Antagonize is fantastic for ranged martials and casters, as it can be really difficult for the creature to get rid of, honestly. Unbalanced Finisher is fantastic for a rogue specifically. At level 8, it's worth looking at Dastardly Dash for grapple builds, and Swaggering Initiative for anybody just looking for a better shot at going first in combat. And for thrown weapon builds, Twirling Throw, adding a nice thrown finisher. Ooh, we are getting here, guys. We're working through it. With the Thaumaturge, you're going to get an implement, but not its use, so you have it. You can glimpse vulnerability, which isn't quite the same as the actual ability Thaumaturges usually get, but it does give the creature you choose a small weakness to your weapon and unarmed strike damage. At level 6, you can actually get the initial ability for the implement, so there are some really good choices here. Amulet is a solid defensive choice for the party, like just for helping the whole party out, but might be hard to use for like a caster who is further from the party, so it's really better for like a melee martial probably. The Chalice can provide really solid healing, but again requires the drinker be adjacent, so just keep that in mind on what kind of build you're putting together and what your like main class is. The Mirror is really cool for melee martials to allow them to flank with themselves. It's especially strong for rogues who then just can almost guarantee themselves the ability to flank an enemy on that turn. The shield implement is a really good choice for a caster, as it will let them raise the shield as a free action while glimpsing vulnerability and adding some really nice AC. The tome is just very strong, especially for something like an investigator leaning into recall knowledge, but it's just good in general. And finally, the weapon is nice as it essentially gives you reactive strike against your exploit foe at level 4 and can even work with a ranged build. Granted, the range for the reaction is fairly short, but that's still cool. On the feats, we have Scroll Thaumaturge, which is probably the strongest for casters, but actually just kind of for everybody, it's just kind of good. Esoteric Warden is helpful, especially for those up in melee. And at level 8, Instructive Strike can be solid, especially on a near martial. And Paired Link is valuable if you chose like the Chalice or something like it, where you would use a touch spell, like something like that, so you can just heal somebody or use the Chalice on somebody from range. Our final 2 classes here are both casters, so spellcasting is coming, with which you're going to get the cantrips, but also a familiar right away, and you choose a patron. You're going to want to choose the patron that gives you the spell tradition you want. So that's really what you're getting from the patron here. Keep in mind that this is int-based casting, meaning your int near marshals and your int casters potentially get the most out of the spell casting here. Every spell tradition is represented as an option from one of the various witch subclasses, so just choose your favorite. Keep in mind that your proficiency with casting will be obviously lower than a full caster, so relying on spells to force saving throws or attack AC isn't as good as support things normally can be, but both are good here. Support casting is, though, always strong, and any spell where there's still a detrimental effect when the enemy succeeds its save will still work for you pretty well. There are some very good feats here as well, maybe more so than some of the other casters we've seen. I highly recommend taking the basic lessons feat, granting you a focus spell and a focus point, and add a spell to your repertoire via your familiar. I recommend Lesson of Dreams, as it gives a solid debuff even when the target creature successfully saves against it, and that's for both marshals and casters. If there is a marshal in the party, particularly a Kineticist, that is able to constantly trigger it, the weakness from Lesson of the Elements can be really strong. Having said that, the support lessons, Lesson of Life and Lesson of Protection, are solid choices just for any support ranged character, but both the related focus spells are just one action, though Protection is sustained, so just keep that in mind and how many actions you need to use every round. If you know you'll take damage each round, 4 rounds of 4 healing each round, that isn't bad at level 4 and only goes up from there. Other great early feats are Cauldron for free potions and Enhanced Familiar for a few more familiar abilities. At level 8, if you leaned into your familiar, it might be worth taking Improved Familiar. Also, if you did take Witch's Armaments early on, which I wouldn't normally recommend, but if you're a grapple build or an unarmed striker, you could. Then at 8, you should consider Sympathetic Strikes. There is something fun about the idea of like a monk witch using hair strikes with flurry of blows, then using a hex focus spell to further debilitate the creature. So, fun things there, although hard to take on a monk, considering all the different attributes you're going to need at higher numbers. But from there, we get into our final class, the Wizard. You will get 4 cantrips, which is a lot, preparing 2 per day, and you get to choose a school, which is the subclass, but you get none of the actual benefits, just the ability to take related feats. At level 4, you can take an Archetype feat to get a hold of the school's focus spell. For a school, assuming that you're there for the focus spell and point, I'd recommend the schools of Ars Grammatica and Battle Magic to marshals. A guaranteed hit range damage option for a focus point and 1 action is actually really good for a melee marshal who otherwise can't do anything ranged. For ranged characters and casters, I recommend Civic Wizardry for control and Rooted Wisdom for decent temporary hit point support. Beyond focus spells, you'll get the usual suite of casting upgrades like we talked about. Great casting here. You are arcane. You're a wizard. So our final suggestions are wizard class feats. Familiars are always nice to have, so you can grab a familiar. So that's something. If you're looking for level 8 options, the usual Bespell Strikes for marshals can be useful to add a little bit of damage when you're doing especially 1 action spells you're casting, and makes a great combo, honestly, with Battle Magic just to pump out some decent damage. It'll feel solid when you get to use it, right, with the focus spell into Bespell Strikes. Finally, Spell Protection Array is a decent defensive action for certain situations. And that's it. That was a lot, but we got through it. I know I could have recommended spells as well, but you can just kind of watch my top and bottom spell suggestions for any of those if you're taking spellcaster related archetypes, and hopefully you'll get some idea of which ones to put on casters and which ones to put on marshals. Multiclass archetypes are awesome, so while you go around and build yourself a flaming Tanuki Kineticist Oracle, I'm going to get back to looking at, you know, the rest of my spells and classes and everything else to build videos about. And as always, adventure on.